The shuttle dropped through the thick orange clouds of Varith Prime, shaking hard enough to rattle Emily Carter's teeth. She gripped the armrests and watched the jungle moon appear below her. Green stretched in every direction. Trees taller than buildings on Earth reached toward the sky. Rivers cut through the land like silver ribbons. Emily had traveled 6 months through deep space to reach this place. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. For 15 years, she had worked with the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Giant sandworms on desert planets, acid-spitting insects on swamp worlds, telepathic hunters that could read your thoughts before you made them. None of that scared her, but the Varithan were different. Everyone said so. They were apex predators, the top hunters on a moon full of deadly things. They had evolved for millions of years to become perfect killing machines. They stood 7 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in smooth black fur that seemed to swallow light. Their claws could cut through metal. Their teeth could crush bone. Their amber eyes saw in complete darkness. 3-star systems feared them. Dozens of research teams had tried to study them. Most of those teams never came home. The shuttle landed with a heavy thump. Emily grabbed her bag and walked down the ramp into hot, wet air. The jungle smell hit her immediately. Rotting leaves. Strange flowers. Something musky and wild underneath it. All. Research Station Helios 7 sat in a clearing surrounded by tall metal fences. The fences hummed with electricity. Guard towers stood at each corner. Armed soldiers patrolled the perimeter day and night. Emily thought it looked more like a prison than a research station. A man walked toward her across the landing pad. He was tall with gray hair and a tired face. His uniform was neat but worn. He looked like someone who had stopped sleeping well a long time ago. "Dr. Carter," he said. "I'm Commander David Brooks. Welcome to Helios 7. Emily shook his hand. "Thank you for having me. I'll be honest with you," David said. "I didn't want you here. I requested that your assignment be canceled 3 times. Earth Command ignored me." Emily smiled. She had heard this before. "You think I'm going to get myself killed? I think you're going to get all of us killed." David started walking toward the main building. Emily followed. The Varithan are not like other predator species. They don't just hunt for food. They hunt for practice. They hunt for fun. They hunt because hunting is the only thing they understand. "Every predator species seems impossible to understand," Emily said, "until someone takes the time to understand them." David stopped walking. He turned to face her. His eyes were hard. 6 months ago, a researcher named Dr. William Park thought the same thing. He spent 3 weeks observing the Varithan from a safe distance. He took notes. He recorded their sounds. He studied their behavior patterns. What happened to him? A hunting party found his observation post. They didn't just kill him, Dr. Carter. They took him apart piece by piece over the course of 4 hours. We found what was left of him scattered across half a mile of jungle. Emily felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face calm. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because you're planning to do the exact same thing he did." "No," Emily said. "I'm planning to do something very different." David stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head and kept walking. The station was small but well-equipped. Emily had her own room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out at the electric fence. Beyond the fence, the jungle waited, dark and green and full of things that wanted to eat her. She unpacked her bags. She set up her equipment. She read through all the files on the Varithan that previous researchers had collected. Most of the files were short. Most of the researchers had not lived long enough to write much, but Emily noticed something interesting. Every single report focused on the adult Varithan, the hunters, the killers, the 7-foot-tall monsters with claws like knives. Nobody, had written anything about the cubs. Emily pulled up the station's security footage from the past month. She watched hours of recordings. She saw adult Verthan moving through the jungle in the distance. She saw hunting parties passing near the fence. She saw guard towers tracking movements in the darkness. And then she saw something else. On the eastern side of the station, there was a small gap in the fence. Not big enough for an adult Verthan, but big enough for something smaller. Something young. Emily watched a recording from 2 weeks ago. In the middle of the night, 3 small shapes squeezed through the gap. They moved on 4 legs instead of 2. They were smaller than dogs. Their black fur was fluffy instead of sleek. Their amber eyes were huge in their faces. Cubs. 3 Verthan cubs. They crept toward the station buildings. They sniffed at garbage containers. They played with discarded equipment. They watched the windows where humans moved behind glass. Then they slipped back through the gap and disappeared into the jungle. Emily watched more recordings. The cubs came back almost every night. They never attacked anything. They never tried to break into buildings. They just watched and explored and played. They were curious. Emily smiled at her screen. She had found her way in. The next morning, she walked the perimeter of the fence until she found the gap. It was hidden behind some storage containers. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. She knelt down and looked through the gap at the jungle beyond. Somewhere in there, 3 young predators were sleeping. Tonight, they would come back. They would squeeze through this hole and explore the strange place where the soft creatures lived. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out a nutrient bar. She broke off a piece and set it on the ground near the gap. "Hello there," she said softly to the empty jungle. "My name is Emily. I think we're going to be friends." The trees did not answer. The jungle remained silent and still, but Emily knew something was listening. Something young and curious and not yet taught to fear or hate. She stood up and walked back to the station. She had work to do. Tonight would be the beginning of everything. Every night for 2 weeks, Emily left small gifts near the gap in the fence. Nutrient bars on the first night. A shiny metal spoon on the second. A soft cloth on the third. Each morning, she checked to see if the gifts were still there. They never were. The security cameras showed the cubs taking everything. They sniffed each object carefully. They passed items between themselves. The largest cub, a female with a white patch on her chest, always investigated first. She was the brave one, the leader. Emily started calling her Shadow in her mind. The other 2 cubs were smaller. One was quick and nervous, always looking around for danger. The other was slow and clumsy, more interested in playing than exploring. Emily called them Quick and Tumble. Dr. Michael Torres found out what she was doing on the 8th day. He was the station's medical officer, a serious man with worried eyes. He came to her room holding a tablet that showed security footage of Emily placing gifts near the fence. "You need to stop this," he said. Emily kept working at her desk. "Why?" "Because you're attracting them. The cubs are coming to the station more often now. They're staying longer. They're getting more comfortable. That's the point." Michael sat down heavily in the chair across from her. "Dr. Carter, Emily, I've been on this station for 3 years. I've seen what the Verthan do to people. I've treated the wounds. I've bagged the bodies." He paused. Cubs are not cute baby animals. They're predators in training. Their play hunting instincts don't know the difference between a small animal and a human being. Emily finally looked up from her work. "Have the cubs hurt anyone on this station?" "Not yet. Have they tried to hurt anyone?" Michael hesitated. "No, but that doesn't mean they won't." "You're right," Emily said. "It doesn't, but it also doesn't mean they will." She turned back to her work. "I'm not going to stop, Michael. You can report me to Commander Brooks if you want. I'll take the consequences." Michael stood up slowly. "The consequences won't just be yours. If something goes wrong, we all pay the price." He left without saying goodbye. Emily knew he was right to worry. She was taking a risk that affected everyone on the station. But she also knew something that Michael and David and all the other researchers had missed. Fear was the problem. Every previous contact with the Varthan had been built on fear. Researchers watched from hiding. They used long-range cameras. They wore protective armor. They carried weapons. They treated every Varthan like a bomb that might explode at any moment. And the Varthan responded to that fear. They saw creatures that hid and ran and smelled like prey. So they hunted. Emily was going to try something different. She was going to show no fear. On the 15th night, she took her experiments further. Instead of just leaving gifts, she sat down near the gap in the fence. She brought her datapad and a cup of tea. She started reading aloud from a book of old Earth poetry. The words didn't matter. The Varthan wouldn't understand them. But the sound of her voice, calm and steady and unafraid, might mean something. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Emily sat alone, reading to the darkness, feeling a little bit foolish. On the 4th night, she heard movement in the bushes. Emily kept reading. She didn't look up. She didn't tense. She just let her voice flow out into the night like water. A small black shape emerged from the jungle. Shadow. The cub's amber eyes reflected the light from Emily's datapad. Her ears were flat against her head, a sign of uncertainty. Emily read a poem about rain falling on flowers. Shadow took a step closer. Then another. Then another. 10 feet away from Emily, the cub stopped. She sat down on her haunches and tilted her head, listening. Her ears slowly rose from flat to upright. Emily risked a glance. Their eyes met. Human and Varthan, predator and prey, looking at each other across the gap between their worlds. Emily smiled. "Hello, Shadow," she whispered. "It's nice to finally meet you properly." Shadow made a small sound. Not a growl. Not a hiss. Something softer. Curious. Then an alarm screamed across the station. Red lights flashed on every building. A voice shouted through speakers about a perimeter breach. Heavy footsteps pounded toward Emily's position. Shadow disappeared into the jungle like smoke. One moment she was there, amber eyes glowing. The next moment, only empty darkness remained. Emily stood up, her heart suddenly racing. Not because of the cub, but because of what the alarm meant. Commander David Brooks arrived with 4 armed guards. His face was pale. "Get inside. Now, what's happening?" Adult Varthan. A hunting party. At least 5 of them. David grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the main building. "They've been circling the station for the past hour. We think they're tracking something." Emily understood immediately. "The cubs. They're looking for their cubs." "Yes, and thanks to your little project, those cubs have been spending their nights right next to our fence." David's voice was hard with anger. "The adults followed their scent trail straight to us." They reached the main building. Heavy doors slammed shut behind them. Through the windows, Emily could see shadows moving in the jungle. Big shadows. Adult shadows. "The hunting party knows their cubs have been coming here," David said. "They think we've been capturing them, hurting them. They're not going to leave until they find out what happened. Then, we need to show them we haven't hurt the cubs." David laughed bitterly. "How exactly do we do that? Walk out there and explain ourselves? They'll tear us apart before we finish our first sentence." Emily looked out at the circling shadows. Somewhere in that jungle, Shadow and Quick and Tumble were hiding. Their parents were looking for them. Their parents thought humans were the enemy. Everything Emily had worked for was falling apart. But somewhere deep in her chest, a small stubborn fire still burned. She had come too far to give up now. She had seen something in Shadow's eyes. Curiosity, intelligence, the beginning of trust. She just needed time. Time she didn't have. The station went into lockdown. All personnel stayed indoors. Armed guards watched every entrance. Nobody slept, and outside the fence, the Varthan kept circling, kept watching, kept waiting. 3 days passed. The adult Varthan did not leave. They stayed in the jungle just beyond the fence, moving like ghosts between the trees. Sometimes, Emily saw their amber eyes glowing in the shadows. Sometimes, she heard their calls echoing through the night. Low rumbling sounds that made the walls vibrate. Nobody on the station slept well. Guards worked double shifts. Researchers stayed in their rooms. Commander David Brooks looked more tired every day. And everyone blamed Emily. She heard them whispering when she walked through the hallways. She saw them looking at her with anger and fear. Dr. Michael Torres stopped speaking to her entirely. Even the cafeteria workers served her food without meeting her eyes. Emily understood their anger. She had done something risky, something that put everyone in danger. Maybe they were right to blame her, but she couldn't stop thinking about Shadow, about the way the cub had tilted her head, listening to Emily's voice, about the curiosity in those amber eyes. There had been something there, something more than hunger or hunting instinct. On the 4th day, Emily couldn't take it anymore. She hadn't slept properly in over 70 hours. Her body felt heavy and slow. Her thoughts were fuzzy at the edges. She wandered away from her room, looking for somewhere quiet, somewhere she wouldn't feel the weight of everyone's stares. She found an observation deck on the 3rd floor of the science building. It was a small room with big windows that looked out over the jungle. Warm artificial sunlight streamed through the glass. A comfortable chair sat in the corner. Emily sat down in the chair. She just wanted to close her eyes for a moment. Just rest her head. Just stop thinking about everything that had gone wrong. She fell asleep in seconds. Emily didn't know how long she slept. She dreamed about Earth, about her childhood home with its small garden, about her mother reading stories to her at bedtime. Safe memories, warm memories. Then something touched her arm. Emily's eyes snapped open. For a moment, she didn't understand what she was seeing. Shadow was standing right next to her. The cub's nose was inches from Emily's face. Those huge amber eyes studied her with intense curiosity. Emily's heart should have been racing. Every survival instinct should have been screaming at her to run, to fight, to do something. But her body stayed calm. Her breathing stayed slow. She felt no fear at all. Shadow sniffed Emily's hair. Her whiskers tickled Emily's cheek. "Hello, little one," Emily whispered. "How did you get in here?" Shadow made that soft sound again. The curious one. Then she did something unexpected. She climbed up onto the chair. Emily stayed perfectly still as the cub settled against her side. Shadow's fur was surprisingly soft. Her body was warm and heavy. She weighed at least 60 pounds. All muscle and bone. Emily heard more sounds. Scrambling, scratching. The other 2 cubs emerged from a ventilation shaft in the ceiling. Quick and Tumble had followed their sister. They approached the chair carefully. They sniffed Emily from every angle. They touched her hands with their cold noses. They seemed confused by how still she was. Then Tumble climbed up onto Emily's legs. He was heavier than Shadow, clumsier too. He stepped on her stomach and made her grunt. Quick was the last to join. He curled up against Emily's feet, pressing his small body against her ankles. Emily couldn't move. 3 predator cubs had her completely pinned. Their combined weight made it impossible to shift even a little bit. She was trapped, and she had never felt more peaceful in her life. The cubs settled into sleep around her. Their breathing slowed. Their bodies relaxed. They made small sounds of contentment, almost like purring but deeper. Rougher. Emily looked at the ceiling and laughed softly. She had spent 15 years studying dangerous creatures. She had traveled across the galaxy, looking for understanding between species. And here she was, buried under a pile of baby monsters, unable to move a single muscle. This was either the greatest success of her career or the last mistake she would ever make. She closed her eyes. If she was going to die, at least she would die warm. She didn't know how much time passed. Minutes, maybe hours. The artificial sun moved across the sky beyond the windows. The cubs slept deeply, their bodies rising and falling with each breath. Then Emily heard footsteps in the hallway. She opened her eyes. 3 adult Varathins stood in the doorway. They were enormous, 7 feet tall even while crouching. Their black fur gleamed in the sunlight. Their claws were fully extended, curved and sharp like knife blades. Their amber eyes locked onto Emily with predator focus. Emily stopped breathing. The adults had followed their cub's scent into the station. They had found a way through the ventilation system, just like their children. And now they were standing 10 feet away from Alcanis, human who was completely unable to run or fight or defend herself. The largest adult stepped forward. Female. Emily could see the resemblance to Shadow in the shape of her face. This was the mother. The mother's lips pulled back from her teeth. Not quite a snarl. Not quite a warning. Something in between. Emily's training told her to stay still. Don't make eye contact. Don't show aggression. Don't do anything that might trigger an attack. But Emily was tired of doing what her training told her. She was tired of fear controlling everything. She looked the mother directly in the eyes. "Hello," Emily said softly. "Your children are beautiful. They've been very gentle with me." The mother's ears flattened. The other 2 adults shifted behind her, muscles tensing. Shadow stirred against Emily's side. The cub lifted her head and saw her mother. She made a sound. A greeting. A reassurance. The mother's ears slowly rose again. Emily realized something in that moment. The adults could see that their cubs were unharmed. They could see that the cubs were comfortable. They could see that the cubs had chosen to sleep on top of this strange, soft creature. The cubs trusted Emily, and now the adults had to decide whether to trust their cubs. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The jungle moon turned slowly in space. The artificial sun continued its journey across the observation deck, and 3 adult Varathins stared at a human who refused to be afraid. Time stopped inside the observation deck. Emily could hear her own heartbeat, slow and steady. She could feel the warmth of the cubs against her body. She could see every detail of the adult Varathins standing in the doorway. The way their muscles coiled under their fur. The way their claws caught the light. The way their amber eyes never blinked. Shadow's mother took another step forward. Her teeth were still visible. Her lips were still pulled back in that almost snarl. She made a sound deep in her throat. A rumbling vibration that Emily felt in her chest. Emily understood that sound. It was a question. What are you? What have you done to my children? Emily did something that went against every rule of predator interaction. She spoke. "I know you're scared," she said softly. "I know you came here looking for your babies. I know you expected to find them hurt or captured or worse." She kept her voice calm and even. "But look at them. They're fine. They're safe. They came to me on their own." The mother's ears moved. Forward, then back, then forward again. She was listening. She might not understand the words, but she understood the tone. Shadow stirred again. The cub lifted her head fully and looked at her mother. Then she did something that surprised everyone in the room. She yawned. A big, wide yawn that showed all her small, sharp teeth. A yawn that said she was comfortable. A yawn that said she was not in danger. A yawn that said this strange, soft creature beneath her was warm and safe. Shadow put her head back down on Emily's shoulder and closed her eyes. The mother's almost snarl slowly faded. Her lips lowered. Her claws retracted slightly. She made another sound, softer this time. Confused. Emily understood. The adults had never seen anything like this. In their world, prey ran. Prey fought. Prey died. Prey did not sit calmly under a pile of cubs and speak in gentle voices. Emily knew she needed to move carefully. Very carefully. She needed to show the adults that she was not a threat, that she respected their children, that she could be trusted. "I'm going to sit up now," she said, very slowly. "Is that okay?" The adults didn't answer. They didn't understand her words, but they watched with intense focus as Emily began to move. She shifted her weight carefully. Tumble grumbled in his sleep but didn't wake. Quick's tail twitched. Shadow opened one eye, then closed it again. Emily used her arms to push herself up, supporting the smallest cub against her chest. She moved like she was made of glass, like the smallest wrong motion would shatter everything. The mother's claws extended again. A warning. Emily stopped moving. She held the position, half sitting up, one cub against her chest. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm just getting more comfortable. I would never hurt them. I promise." Promises meant nothing to predators. But Emily said the words anyway. She continued to move, slowly, carefully. Inch by inch, she sat fully upright. The cubs adjusted around her, finding new positions. Shadow moved to Emily's lap. Tumble slid down to lean against her hip. Quick stayed at her feet, unbothered by everything happening above him. Emily was sitting now. A human surrounded by predator cubs, alive, unharmed. The mother made a new sound. Emily had never heard anything like it before. Low and rumbling, but not aggressive. Not a growl. Not a warning. Later, Dr. Michael Torres would review the recording from his hidden security tablet. He would analyze the sound using every tool available. He would eventually identify it as the Verthan equivalent of complete and total astonishment. The mother was shocked. She couldn't understand what she was seeing. Emily smiled. "I know. I'm pretty surprised too." The other two adults moved into the room. They circled around Emily and the cubs, sniffing the air, studying the scene from every angle. One of them touched Emily's shoulder with a single claw, so gently that it didn't even scratch her skin. Testing, learning, trying to understand. Emily sat perfectly still and let them investigate. She kept her breathing slow. She kept her heart calm. She let them smell her fear, or rather, the absence of it. The adults exchanged sounds with each other. A rapid conversation in a language Emily couldn't understand. They seemed to be arguing, disagreeing. One of them gestured toward Emily with obvious distrust. Another shook its head. The mother ended the argument. She made a sharp sound that silenced the others. Then she walked forward until she was standing directly in front of Emily. Their eyes met. Amber and brown. Predator and prey. Two creatures from different worlds, trying to understand each other. The mother sat down. Not a crouch. Not a defensive position. A proper sit, like a dog settling onto a rug. She tucked her claws underneath her body. She wrapped her tail around her feet. She made herself small and unthreatening. The other adults hesitated, then did the same. They sat in a circle around Emily and the cubs. A protective formation. But they weren't protecting the cubs from Emily. They were protecting Emily with the cubs. Emily felt tears burning in her eyes. She didn't try to hide them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for trusting me." The mother tilted her head, just like Shadow had done on that night by the fence. Curiosity, interest, the beginning of something new. Outside the observation deck, alarms started blaring. Voices shouted. Footsteps pounded through the station. Commander David Brooks and his armed guards were coming. Emily looked at the mother. My people are going to be scared when they see you. They might try to hurt you. I won't let them, but I need you to stay calm. Can you do that? The mother didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She understood the warning. She made a soft sound. Agreement. Or at least, willingness to wait and see. The door burst open. Guards poured into the room with weapons raised. And they found something that no human had ever seen before. A human sitting peacefully among Varthan. Cubs in her lap. Adults at her feet. Everyone calm. Everyone safe. Commander David Brooks stood frozen in the doorway. His weapon hung uselessly at his side. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Emily smiled at him. David, I'd like you to meet my new friends. I think we have a lot to talk about. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Humans had made peaceful contact with the Varathan. Not through weapons. Not through technology. Not through clever tricks or careful diplomacy. A single human woman had fallen asleep, and predator cubs had climbed on top of her. And everything had changed. Emily became famous overnight. Her face appeared on news broadcasts from 100 different worlds. Reporters from every species wanted to interview her. Scientists wanted to study her. Politicians wanted to use her as a symbol. She ignored all of them. She stayed on Vareth Prime. She stayed at Research Station Helios 7. She stayed with Shadow and Quick and Tumble and their parents. There was still so much work to do. Commander David Brooks resigned from his position 3 weeks after the incident. He told Emily it was because he was tired. He told her he needed a break. But Emily saw the truth in his eyes. He had spent years being afraid of the Varathan. He had built his entire career on that fear. Now his fear looked foolish, and he couldn't live with that. Emily understood. Fear was a hard thing to let go of. She didn't judge him for leaving. Dr. Michael Torres stayed. He became Emily's partner in research. He stopped being afraid of the Varathan and started being curious about them instead. He learned to read their body language. He learned to understand their sounds. He became the second human that Shadow allowed to touch her fur. Months passed. The research station changed. The electric fences came down. The guard towers emptied. The weapons were locked away in storage rooms that nobody opened anymore. Varathan started visiting the station openly. Not just the cubs. Adults too. Elders. Entire family groups. They came to look at the strange soft creatures who were not afraid. They came to understand. Emily learned to speak their language. Not perfectly. Human mouths couldn't make all the sounds. But she learned enough to communicate. Enough to share ideas. Enough to build something new. The Varathan elders eventually asked the question that everyone wanted answered. Through a primitive translation device that Emily had spent months building. They asked her why she had not been afraid. Emily thought about the question for a long time before answering. Every other species that met your cubs either ran away or tried to fight, she said. They saw predators. They saw danger. They saw death. The elders nodded. This was their experience too. But I saw something else, Emily continued. I saw children. Curious, playful children who wanted to explore and learn and understand. I saw intelligence. I saw potential. The eldest of the elders, a massive female with scars covering half her face, made a sound of confusion. You are soft. You have no claws. You have no fangs. How can you look at us and not feel fear? Emily smiled. Where I come from, we have a saying. Bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. The elder considered this. And what is the right thing? To offer trust before it is earned. To see the good in others before the bad. To believe that understanding is always possible, even when it seems impossible. The elder was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a sound that the translation device couldn't interpret. Something between a laugh and a sigh and a song. "You are strange prey," she finally said. "You do not run. You do not fight. You simply wait. And when our young climb upon you, you hold them gently." Emily laughed. "Where I come from, we call that babysitting." The translation device sparked and fizzled, unable to handle the concept. The elder tilted her head in confusion. "Never mind," Emily said. "The point is that taking care of children is something we understand. It's something we value. When Shadow and her siblings came to me, I saw babies who needed patience and kindness. I treated them the way I would treat any child, even though they could have killed you, even though they could have killed me." The elder studied Emily for a long time. Then she did something that no Varthan had ever done to an outsider. She lowered her head until her forehead touched Emily's palm, a gesture of respect, a gesture of acceptance, a gesture that said, "You are one of us now." Years passed. Emily grew old on Vareth Prime. Her hair turned gray. Her skin wrinkled. Her body slowed down. But she never stopped working. She never stopped building bridges between species. Shadow grew into a powerful adult. She became a leader among her people. She often visited Emily, bringing her own cubs to meet the strange, soft grandmother who had started everything. The galaxy changed because of what happened on that observation deck. Humans became known as the peacemakers, the bridge builders, the species that could talk to anyone, befriend anyone, understand anyone, not because they were strong, not because they were smart, not because they had better weapons or technology, because they were soft, because they refused to be afraid. Because when strange creatures climbed on top of them, they didn't run or fight. They just smiled and said hello and waited to see what would happen next. Emily died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 93. Shadow was with her at the end, lying beside the bed like she had lain beside Emily in that observation deck so many years ago. The Varthan held a ceremony for her. They carried her body deep into the jungle, to a sacred place where only their greatest hunters were buried. They laid her to rest among their legends. The galaxy sent messages of grief from 1,000 worlds. Everyone knew the story now. Everyone knew the woman who had fallen asleep and changed everything. But the message that mattered most came from Earth, from a small school in a small town where a young girl had just learned about Dr. Emily Carter for the first time. The girl wrote, "I want to be like her when I grow up. I want to be soft too." And somewhere in the jungle of Vareth Prime, Shadow lifted her head and howled at the stars. A sound of grief, a sound of gratitude, a sound that carried across the galaxy, reminding everyone who heard it that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay gentle in a universe full of teeth. The end.